I know a lot of you are probably worried. What if Chelsea get all the attackers? But fear not. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is available on a free. This is the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right, DCL. He's our destiny. You know, once upon a time, I believe his Andrew really rated him. So his dream could be coming true. That's right. We do like a big man, and he's big. And we do like a player that's crocked most of the time, and he's crocked most of the time. So all things being equal, I think we, could be in a good position in terms of what we do with our forward line. We just let Chelsea buy all the attackers, and we get whoever we can on a free. And then that also frees us up to go after the Chelsea rejects, which is, again, a rite of passage for us. So Nani Madueke, where are you at? Nico Jackson? Yeah, we could talk to him too. I will let you know that on the last edition of Friday Night Clive, we got Clive's thoughts on Nico Jackson. Nani Madueke quite clearly. There will be another Friday Night Clive this coming Friday. Clive is back. So starting this week, you'll start to hear his deep, beautiful baritone and wonderful insights again on the pod. This Wednesday, Tim has spoken with one of the foremost experts on Arsenal history and a leading author on Arsenal history. And there's a patron history pod coming on Wednesday. We are still doing transfer dailies every single day, and they're super fun. It's kind of been a fun thing. So on the days when nothing's really happening, we get silly. We lampoon some of the funniest rumors, and on days when things are happening, we dig into it. Get somebody on the pod who's intelligent and articulate instead of just myself, and we talk to that person. So that's still going on. I think we're going to have a Martinelli in the Spotlight episode coming up too, because I really want to dig into what's real, what's rumor, what's myth, what's underrated, overrated about the player. I think he's an interesting player to sort of assess in this moment. So a lot of fun stuff going on over there. And if you use code AVP50, you get half off. What we're going to do today, we're going to talk to a Brentford expert. Mike from the Ealing Road Podcast is going to cover what we are getting in Christian Norgaard. We're going to go through it in detail, his weaknesses, his strengths, what he was for that club, what they think of this move. Also had a chance to talk to him a bit about Thomas Frank at Tottenham and how he will fail spectacularly there, we hope. Talked a bit about Mikael Damsgaard, actually, and Bryan Mbeumo as an option for United. So that's coming up second half of the pod. But we do want to cover, I think, the latest sort of trending topics in Arsenal transfer world, which is primarily the question of what's happening with attackers. And this weekend, we were sort of linked with, and at the end of last week, Eze, Rodrigo still linked, Sesko, Gyökeres. There's still a little bit of Watkins rumors. There's some Nani Madueke stuff out there. And I think we're getting to the point where some of this stuff has to take shape. But we also learned that we are probably going to sign Christian Mosquera, that we're just about ready to announce a Christian Norgaard, and obviously Zubimendi. Thomas Partey is going. So there's a lot of stuff to cover just in the transfer churn. We'll cover all that together today in the first half, and then we'll get to the Brentford view on Christian Norgaard. So here to do the first half with me is Paul. Hello, Paul.
Woohoo! You had me worried there, Elliot. We've got a Brentford expert on the pod today. I'm like, I may have oversold myself. I was very excited about that game where they beat us, and I thought it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't that. I didn't follow that up by supporting the club for the last few years.
You have good company though, because I think Mike said it was his favorite Premier League memory. So you guys, you both thought it was fucking brilliant. You and the host of the Ealing Road Podcast both loved it equally. I will say all you have to do to be an expert is just get a ChatGPT window open and ask it questions, and boom, you're an expert. Oh, we're all being replaced.
You've seen into my soul. I literally have one over to the left here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a few things going on. First of all, we got the confirmation from David Ornstein that it looks like Thomas Partey is moving on, and it looks like the center midfield number 6 position is going to be Zubimendi and Christian Norgaard this season, as Partey and Jorginho both move on. I think this is sensible work from the club. It seems to be good, efficient work. And I wonder what you think of this new group, because this is big change. These are senior, experienced players in the engine room, so to speak, being taken out and replaced with 2 new players, one from inside the Premier League and one from outside. So what's your sort of quick reaction to what is a pretty major shift of a very important part of the team?
Good, because I've got like 2 big thoughts, because I'm like, what can I contribute?
I'll tell you what, you can give me one of the 2 big thoughts. But we'll put the other one behind the paywall. No, I'm kidding. What are your 2 big thoughts?
I have 2 medium thoughts, so we can fit them in.
Give me both.
Things you will not have heard from elsewhere. So I think the thing we are missing when I look at the back and forward of the Discord and just people in general about our we're thinking 1-for-1, one in, one out. I'll be very disappointed if Mikael and the club don't act on what he said, which is the squad's too damn small, right? Mm-hmm. For what football is becoming, the squad is too damn small. The rent is too damn high. The squad is too damn small. So,
to be fair, if Chelsea have all the players, though, you can only get so many.
True. Yeah. But you could maybe... AI is putting office workers, middle management, white-collar...
Retraining them to be footballers. Yeah.
In our heads, we all thought we could be that player. Well, not you, Elliot. You thought you could be that singer. You thought you could be Lin Manuel. Right?
Still could.
Yep. Yeah. Still. But I thought I could be that player. And so there's a lot, potentially... I'm maybe making this point a little long. Anyway, so I think we're going to keep more players than we think. Maybe not loads and loads, but we're going to keep Martinelli. We're going to keep Trossard. And my second big thought, medium-sized, is I was listening to Roy Keane last night, because you know the way YouTube keeps putting things into your feed that you didn't really want, and then you click on it and the next thing you're watching it. Anyway, he had to pick his Man United all-time 11 that he's played with, and like every guy was Pallister, Pally and Butty and Giggsy and Bex, and like they're all good lads, right? Good characters in the dressing room, trained hard every time, and like you're going to need that with a bigger squad. I think that's what Norgaard is, right? Also very good on the pitch.
Yep.
But a compromise player, and we understand, and he has to be a compromise player. You can't stack up, 25, 26 players who are going to play. Okay, we have squad limits. But you can't load it to the gunnels instead of 16, 17 players who think they're going to play a lot. If you're going to have 21, 22 players who are somewhat interchangeable, you're going to need more guys who understand their role in the squad, in the team. And I would say... Trossard maybe struggles with that, but maybe he's got his head round it to some degree. Martinelli, really good lad. Norgaard, really good lad from what you hear. And that's one of the things Brentford did, because when they were in the Championship, they had a lot of hot young things, and they were doing the kind of buy the young guys and like burst through into the Premier League. They couldn't get into the Premier League. They needed to go, and what they concluded was they'd way too many hot young things. They needed some good characters in the dressing room. So they went and got some older guard, no pun intended, players, and that's how they got into the Premier League. They had to rebalance a bit. I think we're going to need some characters. I mean, fans don't want that. They want the hot young thing. They want your Rodrigos. They don't want your Norgaards. I understand they play different positions, Elliot. I have been keeping up, but you need a few of those. If you're going to have a Leo throwing a Moody every now and then, you're going to need your Norgaards keeping it steady.
Well, I think what's hard too is it depends where you are in your trajectory of your sort of winning window. And what I mean by that is, if you are talking about a player who might get 700 minutes in a season, that's what Jorginho got last season. That role is better filled by a 32-year-old experienced player who is really happy to be there and can add things off the pitch. That role is not better filled by a 21 or 22-year-old player who's still desperate to develop and really wants more minutes and needs more minutes than that to be effective. So if you look at like a Lucien Agame, whose profile I really like, I think he's a talent, I think he could be a good player in the future, him coming to Arsenal and getting 700 league minutes doesn't advance that, and how he would handle that remains to be seen. We all watched the All or Nothing documentary, and we all saw some of those players who were not core to the team at the time throwing a strop. We remember, was it Eddie Nketiah telling Sambi, like, hey, we all want more minutes, like man up a little bit. You don't want a moody, pouting young player who's not getting the minutes he wants. And given that we want to win now, an experienced Premier League leader who could be okay with 700 minutes in a season might just be the kind of thing you have to take in, and I accept that. So I think you're right about that, especially too, Jorginho, Partey, maybe Leo goes. That's a lot of the senior roles. I'm not saying he will, but he might. That's a lot of the senior older players in the group, and I don't think you want to take a full step back to just youthful players. So having someone like a Norgaard makes sense in that respect, and it looks like going younger in another area, which is defender with Mosquera. Christian Mosquera from Valencia. It looks like it's going to be a deal just north of 20 million euros. A very talented player, a right-sided center back. We were linked very heavily with Jurel Hato, a player we definitely like. But I think that move has always been linked to a move for Kivior. If Kivior stays, I don't think Hato comes in, and I think Mosquera makes more sense. I do want to make this not about Mosquera because I don't think you or I know him well enough to be like, let's go into the weeds on Mosquera. Forget that. Seems sensible.
Elliot.
I'm not going to sell you short.
I've been doing
here.
my research.
I'm going to sell you really short. No, we'll do scouting videos and things like that. But where I want to take this more is early returns on Andrea Berta, because the big thing, striker and wide forward, haven't been done yet. And we're going to spend some time talking about that. But the moves that just kind of had to be taken care of, that should be easier, we seem to be moving with reasonable alacrity. We've got Zubi, Norgaard, Mosquera, Kepa, re-sign Gabriel, re-sign Miles Lewis-Skelly, and some good rumors about other contract re-signings coming in. So far, aside from the fact that the two biggest pieces aren't done yet, does this look like a pretty efficient, seamless operation, moving from Edu to Berta and getting this business done?
I mean, what I'd say about him is he hasn't cocked anything up, right? Everything that happened kind of should have happened. If Miles Lewis-Skelly hadn't joined us because Berta got involved, that was one of those where, like, you leave that one alone. They're all around the operating table when you show up. You're the new surgeon in town, but like they got the scalpel resting on the chest. The chest is wide open. The skin's peeled back. It's like, and I think that's been the same on pretty much all of those deals. Those should have happened. I don't know the genesis of the Mosquera thing. I mean, I'd love if the narrative was, because I would expect him to come from Spain with, hey, there's a 21-year-old centre back. You should be looking for that. Like, if he had something to do with that, that would be great. I haven't heard anything like that, but like, I could talk myself into that one at this point. I probably know more about Mosquera at this stage than I do about Berta's work at Arsenal. I think hopefully the magic from Berta is to come. It'll be the option 2 or 3 that we weren't thinking about, that and we don't even know about as supporters. So it's all to come. I mean, you would like to think with, planning your season, which they had been doing, your transfer window starts 9 months out, 6 months out, gets really serious 3 months out. And now it's an aircraft in flight. I would expect Berta's contribution to be, when we get to the strikers, particularly if it goes the Jokkerish direction. Mikael Arteta is the customer, and Berta has had the time to think about his options 2, 3, and 4. If there are things we need to do, and like that's what I think. I think what's happened should have happened, and the big addition of Berta is the presence and the sense of direction, etc., that the club will feel, and the confidence in the market talking to other clubs. I mean, it will have helped rather than a vacuum behind you. Like, you feel the club will feel weak. Other clubs will think we're vulnerable. So with Berta, a big enough name coming into the club, everybody will be puffing up their chests and feeling good about the direction we're going. But in terms of the actual mechanics of these deals, I'd like to think those were the club in motion.
Yeah, and I try to evaluate the process more than the outcome, because players can surprise you, right? You can wind up with a player that everybody agreed was the guy and he could fail. You can get a guy nobody likes and he could succeed. You can buy the wrong things in the wrong areas, but you never need those players because your starters stay fit and you win everything anyway. It's all very confusing if you judge on outcome, but on process, like, okay, clearly the manager thought keeping Party was the preferred. I shouldn't say clearly. I say it certainly seems, based on reporting, that keeping Party was the preference. Party obviously didn't want to take the money that was on offer. The club didn't just offer him wages that wouldn't have been sensible given his fitness record and his age. Berta was able, with the help of whoever else is there and whatever collaborative process they had, to find someone that Mikael considered a completely reasonable alternative to keeping Party at a price that they didn't want to spend, and that's Norgaard. Obviously, they're able to execute on the completion of a deal that was decided before Berta arrived with Zubimendi. Mosquera is another good example. I think we really wanted Dean Howson, but Dean Howson is an elite level player. Obviously, he's going to be a starter for Real Madrid. I don't think it was ever realistic we were going to get him to back up Gabriel and Saliba. I know we've been linked with Jarell Hato, but Kivior's performances may have meant that they wanted to re-explore keeping him, and maybe Kivior felt, I may have more of a role here than I thought. And so they need to find a right-sided defender, right, who can back up that side of the pitch maybe a little bit more. And Mosquera is a great example of identifying a player in a really good age bracket who can be acquired at a really reasonable price and for really reasonable wages, who seems to be the quality in terms of what he does, right? I mean, funny thing is he's sort of Saliba-esque in the fact that he passes at a very high completion percentage. He's a very good stand-up tackler. He doesn't get dribbled past much, and he's terrible in the air, right? When Saliba first arrived, he was terrible in the air. So, like, I just think you start to look at all these different moves, and there seems to be a reasonable efficiency with which we're going about handling this stuff that's easy. Then you get to the stuff that's harder. And to be fair, no one is going to be giving Berta or the club any credit for doing Mosquera and Zubi and Norgaard and Kepa and the re-signings if the attacking part doesn't get handled. So let's skip the preamble, the amuse-bouche, and get to the main course right away. Our bouches are plenty amused. Will we be amused by what we get at the attacking positions? That is the real question. And so this is where it starts to get interesting. Over the past few days, we've seen links to Eze, continuing links to Rodrigo, Sesko, and Gyökeres. The battle rages on. It could still be Watkins, Nani Madueke, Nico Jackson, now that Chelsea have just continued to make more of their players surplus to requirements by adding even more players. How are you feeling about the way all this is shaking out? There's a rumor that broke today that Mikael wants the striker done before they leave for preseason. I think that was probably always his hope and expectation anyway. And I think it's reasonable to expect that because it's a position we've needed to address for a while. So what's your sort of high-level 30,000-foot view on the attacker options that we're looking at? And then we can maybe get a little more granular on each one of them.
Maybe a bit more positive and optimistic than the vibe I'm getting from the nervous supporters, fans
I'm with
who
you,
are...
by the way.
Yep.
I think we're going to get it done, and I think we're going to get done some exciting players. I mean, by the way, David Ornstein reported he thinks we still want 3 attackers, which, that's pretty aggressive to get all that done in one window.
It is, but maybe it goes to this ain't one in, one out, right? Or Mikael's just ruining the fact that he will never have a squad matched to what's required here. We need numbers as well. And numbers means wages, and it means fees, and it means you can't go around splooging money on players when the other side of the transaction, the counterparty, knows you're in a bind, right? So if we think everybody's saying just go out there and get the player, if you just go out there and get the player for every position or even for the 2 attacking positions, you're not going to have any of the money that's required for the players for the rest of the squad. You think Christian Norgaard is a little underwhelming, some people? Well, you see what you would have bought with the 1 million you had left after we got to live in the real world and give them some credit that they've got to transact a deal with the other clubs. And the more desperate you are, it doesn't mean the other side goes any quicker, unless you're literally going to give them all the money you have. So you show a little desperation earlier. So here's my third big idea, Elliot.
Okay.
Or maybe
I thought there were only 2, but I'm open to the idea of a third.
3 small, medium-sized ideas. It's my Warhol Maryland's idea, right?
Okay.
How do multi-billionaires show off to each other? They buy huge houses, but that only gets you so far. You spend
they buy sports clubs.
Yeah, that too. But yes. Oh, that kind of fits too. But we'll stick with the first analogy, right? Mm-hmm. They buy 100 billion house, but they all look the same at 100 billion, right? They go
100
on
million,
forever.
but I take your point, yeah.
Yeah, 100 million. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm talking about really rich people, Elliot. Your circle,
okay.
Got it. Couple of levels.
$100 million house. Excited to see what that looks like. Okay.
Yeah. Well, how you differentiate your 100 million house is by the Picassos and the Van Goghs and the this and it's the artwork, but not just any old Van Gogh. The problem with Van Gogh or Picasso is there's only one Guernica, right?
Mm-hmm.
there's only one fella by the cafe with a bicycle, and it's like everybody knows the pieces. Those are the ones you want. If you're Jeff Bezos, bear with me, Elliot. I'm going somewhere with this.
Really try.
You don't want the thing he sketched of his girlfriend. His girlfriend actually looked like that, with the eye and the breast and the art. People misunderstand that. That's actually what his girlfriend looked like. And then people liked it. So then when he got more attractive people around him, he still kept painting the same way because it had been very popular. It's the Warhol Marilyns. Because what did Warhol do? He painted 10 of them, right? Those might actually, one of those will be on the market at any time. You'll find somebody to sell you a Warhol Marilyn. Do you see where I'm going with this yet?
Yep, there's more than one of them.
Yep. And that's what I like what we're doing with the strikers. We're creating our own Warhol Marilyns. We've got 2 strikers in play. Now, maybe I'm giving us a little too much credit here. 2 wingers in play. Maybe one of them's losing interest or we're not. But we've got 2 wingers that we're going for on the left-hand side. You can start to play clubs off against each other. And so I'm more comfortable that we're lining them up, that these players are in play at the same time, putting pressure back on the people we're negotiating with. And that I would like to think is a more mature organization than we got to go out and get this player because it's the one player it shouldn't be. If you're good at scouting and recruiting, unless it's Isak, and Isak isn't on the table, there should not be one striker we're after. There should not be one winger we're after. There shouldn't be one. Zubimendi, I get it. That was the archetype, right? And you'd like to have that with strikers, but Guernica's not on the market. But there'll always be a Warhol's Marilyn available at the right price. What do you think of that?
Well, here's what I'd say. If you could, leave us a 5-star review for this podcast on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen. And then in the review, write to us what you think Paul meant by that analogy. I'd be curious to we'll make this interactive.
Is it not?
What did the analogy mean in your mind? I'll tell you what I think. I am actually with you in this respect. There are times in a market where there is the guy, it's obvious, you get him, end of story, and it's Declan Rice and you pay $100 million, right? In the case of Zubi, I don't think there's only one Zubimendi, but we clearly identified him, worked with him, we had him identified, done. In the absence of a clear, obvious solution at a position as important as striker, where there isn't, to your analogy, that one Van Gogh, that one Water Lilies by Monet, that one-of-a-kind piece
hang on. Don't get me started on bloody Monet. Those bloody haystacks, it was there's 400 of the bloody things out. Don't.
Okay, how about Da Vinci?
Yeah, sure.
The what's her name? The in the Louvre, the thing, the woman, she's always following you. Her eyes always look at you.
Mona
Lisa.
Lisa.
Yeah, that's it. Mona Lisa. Or was that Michelangelo? Da Vinci. I was right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. It's in the Da Vinci Code after. I'll be really weird if they name the book the Da Vinci Code after a painting done by Michelangelo.
Well,
anyway,
that was the secret.
See what you've done to me? Do you see this? This never happens to me otherwise. I assure you, the interview with Mike from Ealing Road is very much on the road. This is Ealing off the road.
Okay.
We are now.
The road Ealing.
So I do think you're right. In a situation where you need a very important position and there isn't a clear and obvious choice, you have to have multiple targets. And having multiple targets also gives you more leverage in the negotiation with those targets. Now, with Eze, it's a little different because you have a release clause. Now, there is some reporting the release clause can be paid in multiple installments, which would be a benefit. I do want to say this, though, to the people
you don't want to overpay the fee, the wage. There's always negotiation.
Yeah.
So,
there is this belief that you just have to have multiple players at every single position and they should all be starter or star quality. And I think that's wrong. I think every team has a star or two where those guys got to play all the games. And they mostly do play all the games. And the option behind the guy isn't that good. Liverpool are a great example. You say, they've got all these forwards. They got one Mohamed Salah. Who's Mohamed Salah's backup? Beats me because he never plays. You know what Mohamed Salah has averaged over his 8 seasons in the Premier League? 36 Premier League appearances in his 8 seasons. He averages 36. He's had multiple seasons where he's played all 38 games. Okay? So we don't even really know what a Liverpool backup for Mohamed Salah looks like, except in very limited scenarios, like when they play, Plymouth in the FA Cup and he doesn't play and they get eliminated. Okay? Or PSV in the Champions League and they lose. I think the same thing goes for Erling Haaland. I mean, you could see him, Marmoush might be this guy, that guy sort of, but they got one striker. You only have one Erling Haaland. We have one Bukayo Saka. So the idea that this summer is only going to be good if we get a starting left wing and a starting center forward and also a Saka backup, in my opinion, 5 forwards plus Ethan is enough. And if Saka isn't fit, you either move Rodrigo over there or you play Ethan or, you figure something out. But ultimately, teams that lose their star player for big chunks of seasons don't win stuff. And the stars play. Real Madrid don't have another Kylian Mbappe. Barcelona didn't have a guy behind Lewandowski. Really? Not really. I mean, they have options they could try. PSG, for as talented as they are, they only have 4 forwards I really rate. They got Dembele, Doué, Kvara, and Barcola. Now, that's an amazing 4. But you go past that, it's just not that impressive. So I would say that if we were to get a great left wing option and a great striker, that will be enough. The question is who they should be. I am leaning towards Sesko, and I am of the belief it will be Sesko. That's where I think we're going to land, and I think that will land sooner rather than later. I think left wing is still a little harder because while I think we very much like Rodrigo and very much want Rodrigo, and I think Rodrigo will leave Madrid, it's a complicated deal and it could take a while. Do you have a strong lean between Eze and Rodrigo, maybe a Morgan Rogers? Is there one that really, really calls to you more? Because everyone knows I love Eze. But Eze at left wing is still a little bit of an unknown to me, and he is, 3 years older than Rodrigo, who I think is more naturally a left winger. So what's your take on the left wing position in particular?
So I think Eze is a little bit the stalking horse for Rodrigo. To your point, right, it might be an easier negotiation with Eze, more straightforward. But the one with...
Well, we know he'd want to come to Arsenal. He is an Arsenal lad, after all.
Yeah. And prove people wrong. I don't know who he's going to prove wrong. The guy who was his coach when he was 11. That seems a little vindictive. I don't know who else he's proven wrong.
Yeah.
The rest of us haven't really been talking about it. But if he's second prize, I think he'd be a really good second prize. And look, he's going to want to come into that inside channel, the kind of left 8 spot, which means movement, which means our left 8 moves out. And so that gives you kind of a dynamic. He's got the quick feet. He's a bit Santi Cazorla-ish in some ways. All sorts of ways he's not. Quick feet, quick mind, likes to get shots off. There's loads I love about him. Great, more of a dribbler, I think, even more so than Rodrigo. There's loads I'd love about Eze. But I know less about Rodrigo. Obviously, we all do our bit of reading, and he's more exotic. But might not have Eze might have the better first and second season over Rodrigo as he fits in, adjusts. Do
you have worries about Eze though playing off the left? I mean, it is a bit of a change in the sense that he's not going to hold the width and hug the touchline and sprint past players and give us width and crosses from the left. I think he's going to want to get into the channel. He's going to want to dribble into the box. He's going to want to be a little bit more central, which I don't mind, by the way, because I think we've struggled to platform our left wing and struggled to get the ball to our left wing at times in the past few seasons. But he would not be the Martinelli in terms of the qualities he brings to the position. He might be a little bit more akin to Leo.
I think that's right. And so, yeah, it is a question what we would do when we need width, but maybe you play Martinelli when you need width. Maybe we got to get past 90 minutes starting every game to 60, 30 minutes. Maybe it's Martinelli who starts and Eze comes on, or vice versa, different parts of different games. You need a guy who can break down a low block. We need a super good dribbler to run at defenses, who'll take shots, clever quick feet, clever mind, close control in tight areas. You want a guy who can really take it into the box and give them trouble and just create mayhem. I think he does all of that. What you need is the complementary player that goes the other way. Maybe it's Rice learning that thing Xhaka used to do where he'd go out to they'd swap, he'd go out to the wing, they'd open up holes, space. There are different ways of doing it. It's not perfect, but it would work for many games. good enough for many games of breaking down low blocks, and then you throw on Martinelli for 30 minutes and vice versa. So not perfect, but I could see it working very well for us.
I mean, look, you would not hear any complaints from me if it's Eze. I just think it is slightly outside the perfect fit criteria of age and position, in the sense of, a guy going into his, I think this will be his age 28 season, right? He just turned 27 actually. So
which is a bummer, because we can't really do the 27 before he's 28.
He's 27.
27 right now, and
like
he used to be 26.
Yeah, so I guess it will just be his age 27 season, but it's like 27 versus 24, and a bit more of an 8-stroke 10 than a true left winger versus Rodrigo, who I think really is a left wide forward. So
yeah, now here's my interesting thought on it, right? He turns into the same space. If he plays left wing, he'll turn into the same space that Gyökeres tends to turn into, like that area that Gabriel Jesus used to dip into on the left. Now he'll run in behind as well, so they could learn their patterns off each other. It would force Gyökeres to run in behind even more and find space that direction. But Gyökeres would pull his centre back to that side with him, because you can't ignore him, which means there is space opening up for Eze where he wants to be, moving into that middle pocket. Now, you're going to have some triangling to do there with whoever the left 8 is. There are patterns they could work out, but it's certainly condensed, right? Sesko would tend to drop more to the right, more like Havertz into that pocket there, or run in behind more on that side. Need a smarter mind than me to work out whether there's a pattern there that can work for them. But interestingly, they'd come to the same areas, which could be really good if they're clever and they play off each other and they get their timings right. And Gyökeres pulls the centre back to the left of the post, opening it up for Eze.
Yeah. I'll be obviously very curious to see what we do. I do think the Ornstein report that we could get 3 forwards, though, and that we want 3 forwards, that only feels right to me if one of Leo and Martinelli goes. And I hear what you said at the top of the pod, but again, like, there's no world where we buy 3 forwards and keep Leo and Martinelli. There just isn't, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. It wouldn't be the right use of resources. It wouldn't be the right way to build the squad. There's just better, smarter things you could do.
But that would be 3 in, maybe, it depends on who you count in, but 3 in, 1 out, at least if we're talking about those guys. So.
Yes, I agree. Yes, of course. But my point is, there is a world where I think both Leo and Martinelli do stay this summer, but I don't think that's the case if we get 3 forwards. I cannot see that happening. And on the striker thing, I know there have been some links to Ekitike by Build, and I know that, Nico Jackson, I think, is mostly just reporters putting 2 and 2 together and getting 22, because Chelsea now have so many attackers, and surely one of them probably leaves. I have thought it'll be Sesko for a while now. I continue to think it'll be Sesko. Whether that's the right choice or not, this is the one thing I want to be clear that I say multiple times. I know I've said it on other pods, so apologies if you feel it's redundant at this point. I said this from the beginning, so I want to stand by it. I will not criticize the club for which one they choose, because to Paul's point, I don't think there's an obvious right choice guy. I don't think it's bad process if we get Sesko. I don't think it's bad process if we get Gyökeres. I don't think it's bad process if we get Ekitike or, whoever. I think it's bad process if we don't get a striker. But if we get one, I don't feel strongly enough that one is the right one that I'm going to be like, oh, they clearly got it wrong. I feel, by the way, the same thing with Eze and Rodrigo. If they pick one of those 2, I don't feel strongly enough that one is the right one to where I will say it was wrong. I think at that point, we'll just have to wait and see. But if it is 3 forwards, it gets very interesting squad size-wise. I'll be very curious to see what we do. I think we should leave this there. I've got to...
Just before we do, Elliot, I got to correct you on something. I'm going to go the other way on that. It's Das Bild. With an explosive T.
Das Bild, even though it ends with a D.
Yes, I know, very confusing. Das Bild.
There's one thing about this podcast. We are sticklers for pronunciation. Let me tell you that. Okay, so...
Victor Gyökeres.
There you go. You got it. Nailed it in one. I'm going to talk to Mike from the Ealing Road Podcast.
The second most knowledgeable Brentford expert on the pod today.
Yeah, besides only you. But you are by far the bigger Van Gogh expert. obviously.
Oh.
So, by the way, you can follow Mike and listen to Mike on the Ealing Road Podcast. But if you want Mike's personal account on Twitter, he's at MikeJ_24, MikeJ_24, where he does some of his own content there as well. He's going to be coming up. We're going to talk Christian Norgaard. We're going to talk about Thomas Frank at not at Brentford any longer, at Tottenham Hotspur, regrettably, and some other topics around that. We'll have a transfer daily today. We'll have the history pod on Wednesday. We're going to have Friday Night Clive on Friday. There's going to be all kinds of cool stuff. We'd love to have you along for the ride. And obviously the art podcast will be out next week. Okay. Let me tell you before we bring in Mike about Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring platform you go to when you want to hire fast, but also get the right candidates. I've been having more and more conversations with people lately about how the hiring process is frustrating. Now, candidly, most of those conversations are people looking for jobs. But if there's one thing that's clear, it's there's too many sites, there's too many places. Do you do LinkedIn jobs? Do you do this website, that website? There's all these different sites. Indeed is one place. You find the job that most suits you. You find the candidates that most suit the job. And that simple fact means that you have a better hiring experience for both the hirer and the hiree, right? And you get what you pay for. When you sponsor a job, your post jumps to the top of the page. You get 45% more applications, according to Indeed data, and you get the right applicants. Right. So I think it's just a smarter way to hire. How fast is Indeed? In the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Okay. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ArsenalVision. Just go to Indeed.com/ArsenalVision right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/ArsenalVision. Terms is going to supply hiring. Indeed's all you need, Paul. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. And that's enough of you. Let's turn it over to me and Mike. Okay, and now without further ado, you can find him at Mike Live in 5 on YouTube and TikTok. You can find him on the Ealing Road Podcast. It is our resident Brentford expert, Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Elliot. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on. And I have, I would say, a small army of experts from other club podcasts who have come to hate me because I only ping them when we are rating their club for a beloved player. So I'm not welcome in Brighton circles, I can tell you that much, and one or two other places, but I really appreciate you being here. Before we dive into it, I have two important questions. One is, how do Brighton people pronounce Christian Norgaard's last name?
Christian Norgaard.
So you say Norgaard. Okay, because there is quite a battle going on in our Discord. There are some YouTube videos that pretty clearly state it is meant to be pronounced Norgaard.
Yeah, I think that's the Danish pronunciation. But I mean, it's weird when you're pronouncing footballers' names. You never know whether you want to Americanize it or Anglify it. I don't know. It's
well, the weird thing, right? If you think about it, is so you could be like, well, you should say it the way it's meant to be said. But then there are certain names where we never had that debate. Like when we had Hector Bellerin at our club, no one was like, it's Berlin. You have to say Berlin, and I don't see a lot of people doing the Kepa Arrizabalaga. I don't see a lot of that. So we do sort of pick and choose, I think, which names we're meant to pronounce the right way. And I just have to say, for people who aren't massively across the pronunciation debate, if I continue to say Norgaard, I think we will lose what listeners we have left to the podcast. So I'm going to say Norgaard for the purposes of this conversation. I hope that our Danish listeners won't be any more mad at me than when I accidentally, momentarily made him Norwegian the other day. So, I'm getting everything wrong these days. I'm not on a lot of sleep this week. That's going to be my excuse. So before we dive into him specifically, just so many changes happening at Brentford right now. You've just appointed a set-piece coach to be your manager. You've lost a beloved longtime manager who's really helped elevate the club. It looks like you're losing your captain to us. You may be losing your top scorer to Manchester United or Tottenham, but probably Manchester United. What's the mood like? Is there a sense of we will overcome, we will survive, or is it pretty downtrodden at the moment?
I've had better weeks, for sure. I've had better weeks. Like you just mentioned, I think Thomas Frank is obviously the big one. Having taken Brentford from a mid-table championship club to an established Premier League team, and really and truly the only way we've been looking since we've been in the Prem is up. That's a big loss. That's a really big loss. I think at the moment there is, from large sections of the fan base, quite a bit of doom and gloom, especially over the Keith Andrews appointment, just because no one knows anything about him. He's never held a head coach position before. But I think what sensible Brentford fans, and I think what most Brentford fans will kind of flip towards the start end of the season, given hoping that we sign a lot more players, considering we're losing so many, is that we have to trust in the people that have got us into this position. Matthew Benham, the owner, has basically taken Brentford from League One to the Premier League in a matter of years, and he is yet to make a mistake on that journey. Having appointed Thomas Frank when he was the assistant manager. If you go even further back, we appointed Mark Warburton when he had no managerial experience and he got us out of League One. So I think there is a lot of doom and gloom at the moment. It's almost like, what is going on? Because you can't blame people for thinking that way. I've been thinking like that. It is almost just like, well, like you said, we're losing our manager, our top scorer, and our captain.
Yeah.
Especially the Norgaard transfer just escalated so quickly. I've never seen a transfer be done and dusted so fast. It is, it feels like the end of times, but I have faith in the ownership scheme. I have faith in the management structures, and hopefully we get a few more players in come the end of the window and we're ready to go again.
Yeah, it feels like quite a long time ago now that you were newly promoted and we were going to make your Premiership debut memorable, your Premier League debut memorable, as Gary Neville and Michael Carragher danced with the home fans while we dismayed at our defeat at your hands. So no hard feelings, but I would say that's not one of our better memories. I'm sure it's one of your favorite memories, probably from
one of my favorite. Yeah, one of my favorite memories.
First day back in the Premier League. Heck of a way to do it at our expense. We'll get into Frank at Spurs a little bit down the line, because I do want to get your take on that, and maybe a bit on Mbeumo potentially at United. And I also want to get a quick thought on Damsgaard from you, because I think he is a very, very talented player and one that I don't think you'll lose this summer, thankfully, for you guys. But let's do the Christian Norgaard conversation. So I think the first thing I want to do is I want to tell you what I feel like the popular perception is of him at the moment in the Arsenal fan base. I think there are some Arsenal fans that are very excited about this signing and see it as a very sensible way to add strength and depth to our midfield core, and in particular our central midfield role. There are some that aren't as excited about it, but the perception seems to be more of a destroyer, more of a guy who's going to break up play, physically strong player. We've all seen the statistic by now that he's won the ball back in midfield more times than anyone in the Premier League aside from Moises Caicedo. Do we have him right or do we have him wrong? Is he really a destroyer who breaks up play and lets the other players around him progress the ball and be more creative? What do you think of him as sort of his elevator pitch on his game?
I think to limit his game to just that facet would be doing him a disservice, to be honest. I've made a video on it, and I think the best way to describe Christian Norgaard is as a genuine all-rounder midfielder. I think he can do a little bit of everything, and what he lacks in some areas, i.e. pace, he makes up for in others. I think, given his age and given the amount of games he's played and given the fact that he's would have been going into his 5th Premier League season with Brentford, his football intelligence is crazy. I think one of the biggest compliments I can pay Christian Norgaard is that whilst he's not the most vocal captain, he completely leads by example. I think when Brentford aren't with him, we are a completely different team, and that's typified by our record without him last season. We played 4 without Christian Norgaard and we didn't win any of those games, but it goes back even further than that. And whilst I agree with the sentiment that is probably the strongest aspect of his game in terms of that ability to disrupt in midfield, I think since his Premier League debut in 2021, Norgaard's made 201 interceptions, which is the most in the Premier League during that period. He ranks 2nd for ball recoveries and 3rd for tackles won. That's a remarkable stat in and of itself. 3 stats that are really great. So I would say that's his strongest asset of his game. But I think whilst he is that disruptor in midfield, he's always looking forward. He's someone that's comfortable under pressure. His long-range passing is phenomenal, I think. I can already see him in a system where the wingers like to stay high and wide like they do at Arsenal. Mm-hmm. And to only label him as that, I think that like I said, I think that's the strongest aspect of his game. But to just label him as that, I think takes away some of his other qualities that perhaps people that don't watch Brentford week in, week out wouldn't know about.
Interesting. We'll get into strengths and weaknesses a little bit more in a moment. But one thing I did want to tease out from this season is that he had a reasonable goal and assist return, which is not really something we're used to seeing from our number 6. Was that an outlier? Was it all just set piece goals? Was he doing something different or deployed in a different way this season that allowed him to have more end product? What was the reason for that?
Well, we might go on to talk about it, but I think Brentford's double pivot this season has been quite fluid. You've spoken about Mikael Damsgaard. He's the kind of set 10, but that's number 6 that Thomas Frank likes to play with. 2 of the 6s, they can both do a bit of going forward and going back. So Norgaard, a lot this season, has been in more advanced positions than he has been in previous years. But yeah, the goal threat, I think is his most prolific season. He scored 5 and he's assisted 4. But like you mentioned, a real asset from set pieces. He can attack the box. He can crash the box in a similar way to Mikael Merino. But he's also, and it's weird for a 6, he's also Brentford's best finisher in midfield. I think if I could kind of put my money on a Brentford player in the box to have a goal scoring opportunity, I'd put my money on Christian Norgaard. He strikes the ball really cleanly. I think there was a goal that he scored against Wolves this season where he gets into like a tight position on the right-hand side of the box and just plants his effort across the goalie into the bottom corner. So it's a bit of an outlier, but he does have qualities, and it goes kind of back to his football intelligence. He knows how to time his runs, and like you mentioned, he's a threat from set pieces as well. So a bit of an outlier, but I've enjoyed it. It's been fun to see him scoring a few goals.
It's funny too, because when I look at how Mikel Arteta uses midfielders, a lot of times they don't wind up in the exact round hole that we'd expect. They wind up being more of a square peg in a square hole. And what I mean by that is we all thought Declan Rice would be our 6. He's our 8. Mm-hmm. At one point, I think Mikael really liked the idea of Kai Havertz at 8. Mikael Merino is an 8. And when I look at the profile, they're big, duel-winning, ball-recovering midfielders who can get their head on something in the box, who have a good ability to finish when presented with a chance. And so I sort of wonder if Norgaard might at times play that left 8 role for us. Now, having said that, that's getting to be a crowded position between Rice and Kai and Merino. But you mentioned it was more of a double pivot this season. He did get into the box and cause havoc. So given the way we use that non-Odegaard 8 role, is that a role you could see him playing at Arsenal at times if it was called on to do it?
I think potentially there's definitely potential for him to be able to do it. I see him more as a 6, but it kind of points to his versatility as a central midfielder, that he can do both the 6 and the 8 role. The only one that I don't think I could see him in is a 10, but obviously that's a position that's going to be locked down by Odegaard either way. But I think he has all the qualities to be able to do that. The only thing that might hold him back in that position, especially in a team like Arsenal where you're going to have a lot more possession of the ball, is I don't really see him as a central midfielder who gives and goes. He's more of that bounce pass, more the one that kind of gets the ball and then sprays it on, as opposed to the one that plays the ball off and then continues his run to keep going. And I think that's probably a thing that's come with age. He's 31 years old. That's why I think maybe there's been Arsenal fans that haven't been as happy with this signing. But for me, he can do a lot in that midfield, and I think he has the attributes to mainly be a 6 and collect the ball off the back 4 and the goalkeeper, which he has been doing for Brentford a lot this season. But he can pop up in those positions a bit more advanced in the pitch.
Let's get a little more granular. In terms of sides of the pitch, does he favor a side? Does he prefer the right or left, half space? Is he stronger passing to one flank or the other?
I think I don't really see, because he can use both feet. I wouldn't say that he favours a side more than another. I think what typifies that the most is that Brentford have actually changed. Well, they've kind of refound their style the season just gone. When we came up to the Premier League, we were a lot more direct. We played to the strength of Ivan Toney a lot. Yeah. And we played different football to when we were in the Championship, when we had most of the ball, and we had a slow build-up play. This season, Christian Norgaard's been pivotal in that we've kind of reverted back to that because we don't have an Ivan Toney. And he's the one that is always coming short to collect the ball off the goalkeeper, spray it onto his centre-half or his right-back, or spin and spray balls forward. And that's kind of been Brentford's approach this season. We have slow and low build-up play, but once that press is baited and we can bypass it, Christian Norgaard is often the one that kickstarts that transition, either by spraying balls out to the wings. But he's not, I wouldn't say he's confined to a certain area of the pitch because his passing range is so good. And he's actually really underrated in moments where the ball can or play can get congested within one area of the pitch. He's actually someone that has really quick feet, and for someone that's not as fast generally, for him to be able to have quick feet and decision making, I always go back to it, football intelligence. He is always so calm on the ball. So it's not a case of where he is, it's more a case of doesn't matter where he is, he's going to find a way out 9 times out of 10. And yeah, I think to limit him to one area of the pitch, I don't think would be doing him a justice, I think.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think obviously at Arsenal, the number 6 is a player you want to be able to access those wide forwards, and in particular, Bukayo Saka. Thomas Partey, one of the things I think he was very good at and has always been very good at is getting that ball on his right foot and whipping that sort of curling pass into Bukayo Saka, kind of around the opposition midfield and onto the touchline. And getting the ball to Bryan and Mbeumo early and quickly is the remit of, I would assume, the midfielders at Brentford. And I'm guessing that Norgaard was pretty good at that. So I could see how Mikael might look at that and say that translates to what we want him to be able to do. You mentioned that he gets the ball out pretty quickly and he's clever under pressure. So would you say fairly press resistant then, not someone who's going to lose the ball? The one thing that I think you have to be able to do as the deepest midfielder at Arsenal is just have that ball security, because if you lose the ball in that area, there's not going to be a lot of cover behind you, right? And at times, I think when we've seen Thomas Partey, for example, lose possession, that's when opposition attackers have been able to get into space and score goals against Arsenal. And so, we had Jorginho, who really wasn't mobile. And I'm not saying that Damsgaard is, Norgaard, don't panic. We haven't done that yet. Norgaard is incredibly mobile, but how is he in terms of press resistance and just his ability to recover if there's a quick change of possession?
Yeah, I think he's good. He's good. I think if you're thinking about the role that he's going to fill at Arsenal in terms of that Jorginho position, stepping up when he's needed, he can do that job. I've rarely remember, or I don't remember too many instances of him losing the ball under pressure. It's more going back to what I said earlier. When he is under pressure, he often makes the right decision. And more than that as well, I think because of that football intelligence, it would be the easy thing for a midfielder, and maybe a reason why Arsenal fans were frustrated with Jorginho at times during his spell at the club, is that maybe he goes backwards or sideways a bit too much. With Norgaard, he doesn't do that. He always will look forward if there's an opportunity to do so, whether that's driving into the space with the ball at his feet and taking players out of the game on the opposition, or by finding that long-range pass.
Interesting.
But yeah, I rarely see him get dispossessed, but even when he does, he normally comes out on top in those duels. So I think just this whole, and we might get into the whole transfer itself, but I just think it makes a lot of sense for him, and it makes a lot of sense for Arsenal in terms of what they need, because you're taking the captain of another Premier League club who is very, very highly rated by the fans of that Premier League club. We think he's one of the most underrated midfielders in the Premier League. Wow. And we're all devastated that he's leaving. And he, even despite his age, has showed not that many signs of slowing down this season. And even if he has in terms of his pace, he makes up for it with how he reads the game.
Yeah, I've long had a theory that if you could invent a machine, some kind of app or algorithm that could measure fan sentiment on a player, that would be a really important input for a transfer, because no matter how much Y-Scout minutes you've got, or no matter how many YouTube comps you have, or no matter how many times a scout goes to a game, maybe you watch 5 90s or 10 90s of the player, no one knows the player like people like you and I who watch every 90 of the player for 4, 5, 6 seasons in every competition, then sometimes watch them again. And, I think measuring that sentiment can be really, really relevant, because whatever the data says, these are some of his strengths, these are some of his weaknesses, if a player is at the level. And hearing, that Brentford fans are so disappointed to lose him, as much as I feel for you, I think tells you a lot of what you need to know. I do want to get on to a few weaknesses questions in a moment, but since you raised the transfer, I'll just ask you this. Is there confusion around the fee? Do you have any thoughts on why the fee is this? And maybe if you want to make fun at Tottenham in your answer, because I saw that they were quoted 45 million and we appear to be paying 10. I think Phil Costa, who I did a podcast with yesterday, said his theory, and again, this is just his theory, is when Norgaard signed the new deal, there may have been certain clubs that he was told, if they come, we're going to give a really easy price so that you're not pricing yourself out of a move at 31 years old to a big club, because absent that, £10 million doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for someone under contract till 2027 who's the captain of your club.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I was baffled by the fee when Ornstein started tweeting about it. I made a video and I was like, that 10 million for our captain, arguably our most important player at the club, seems very low. I would argue that even if he ran his contract down until the end of it and he played for us for another 2 seasons, that would be more valuable than if he went to Arsenal for 10 million, because that in today's market is peanuts.
Yeah. You're certainly not replacing a player of that quality and importance with that amount of money.
Especially with the way that Brentford work, because we don't tend to go for that kind of profile of midfielder. I would be very surprised if we do, but I think there is a need now for us to get someone in of that ilk who is a kind of an older head, has Premier League minutes under his belt, as opposed to the younger signings that we tend to go for. So yeah, the fee to me is crazy. I think 20 million minimum for our captain, considering how important he is for us. Like I said at the top, like we are a different team without Christian Norgaard. He just makes everyone around him better, which is
I have to admit, I think Phil's theory makes a lot of sense, right? You're Christian Norgaard, you say, okay, I'll sign a new deal. But if, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, or, Chelsea or whoever it is, if these clubs come in for me, if Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern come in, you have some cadre of clubs that are sort of a dream move, then the price is 10 million. You know what I mean? Something that says, I'll stay. You won't lose me for free. I won't leave now. But if one of these dream clubs come, because he's getting to the point of his career where if he doesn't move, the move's not happening. So that's the only way I can see the fee making sense. From a weaknesses standpoint, just quickly, like obviously a player you really love, a player that means a lot to the fans, and a player that's really important to you. So sometimes it's not a lot of fun to pick those players apart, but pick him apart. What's the bear case on this player? What are the things that you say, if this aspect of his game is really, if it really shows up, then that's how this could fail for you, or that's where you might get frustrated with him? What are the things, when these parts of his game show up, what are those parts that we're going to be groaning at,
I think the biggest one that and it's probably not even a weakness per se, but it's perceived as a weakness because we're so much worse without him, is his injury record. I think he has become a little bit fragile towards the back end of his career. Not so much this season, but I've known that Thomas Frank is one to manage his minutes a lot because of the close relationship they had, and because Thomas Frank recognised that we're a better team with him.
Good news is,
inside.
once you pull on the Arsenal shirt, you're basically an Iron Man. You never get it. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, carry on.
But yeah, his injury record is a slight concern. I've mentioned his pace, that there are points where sometimes his pace can catch him out in transition against younger teams. I think you saw it at the Emirates last season with that tackle on Martinelli.
Is that a temperament thing, or just getting caught out of position and trying to rescue the situation?
He's just an incredibly strong tackler. Like I've never. He tackles like a centre half, and he's not afraid to throw his weight around, which sometimes has caught him out. I think he's got a few red cards for Brentford in the past. There was one at Everton away last season where he flew into Jordan Pickford, which many people might want to do that, but he got sent off for it. And obviously that one against Arsenal, which was kind of boundary, high tariff yellow or red. He could argue either way, but he can sometimes be quite strong in the tackle. But I don't really see that as a weakness. I think you want that kind of bite in your team. I think Mikael Arteta wants that kind of bite in his team. You can see that and you mentioned the kind of profile of players that you're bringing in midfield, those kind of big, tall, strong in the tackle destroyers. He fits that bill for sure. And then the other weakness, which I've already half mentioned, is that kind of short to mid-range passing, but it all kind of ties into the pace aspect, because he's not one that is going to be, spraying balls to his other 8 or to his 10 and then continuing his run, because he just doesn't have the legs to do that. But I would say his injury record is pace and his short to mid-range passing, and sometimes he can be a little rash in tackles, but that's not necessarily something that you don't want.
Interesting. You mentioned his age, obviously. He is 31. Did you notice any kind of decline athletically or performance? Did he fade in games? Was there, late in the season, did he look worse than the beginning of the season? Any sign that age is showing up? You may not know this, but I am renowned for being an adherent to the concept of an age cliff, and tend to write players off the minute they cross the 30-year-old dotted line. But any sign that he's in decline?
There was a moment at the start of the season, within the first kind of 3 or 4 games, and he had a bit of a shocker, which is weird for a player like Norgaard, because he's one of those that is going to be a 7 out of 10 at least every single game. And he had a bit of a shocker, and we lost the game. I think it might have been away at Man United potentially. And
yeah, well, you can't lose there. I mean, for God's sakes, they're terrible.
Well, I know we did, which is weird. We had this horrid run at the start of the season, but anyway, he had a bad game, and there were a lot of knee-jerk reactions towards it. He's gone, his legs are done, we need to bring him in. But I went on the pod, and we went on our podcast and said, with Christian Norgaard, it will only be one bad game. It will not take him long to get back to those levels. And the next game, he was the man of the match. And it's just like, that's the kind of, I feel like he holds himself to really high standards. He would have been the first to know that he had a terrible game, but then he goes out next week, and from there, consistent, like I just mentioned, 7 out of 10 at least every single week. And that's been the case basically since he joined Brentford back in 2019. And remember, we signed him when we were in the Championship. That relationship with Thomas Frank, he's blossomed from like our captain in the Championship to our captain in the Premier League, and no one has taken that shirt off him, which I think shows that even though he's getting a bit older, particularly towards these last 2 seasons where, you know, we've kind of established ourselves now in the Prem. I know the season before last we had quite a difficult one, but there were a lot of injuries, and Norgaard was a part of that as well. But he's managed to keep his place in that team that are looking to build and build and build, and that goes to show what a player he is.
One of the things that I think Mikael Arteta might be thinking about with this move is just having another senior leader in the group, someone that can show the younger players what it means to be a professional at the top of the game long term, and how to live and how to take care of your body and how to prepare. Because Thomas Partey is one of the oldest players in the group. He's going. Jorginho, obviously hugely admired by Mikael for his leadership, one of the oldest players in the group. He's going. Leo Trossard might be staying, but I still think there's a chance he winds up going. Zinchenko going. Tierney going. A lot of the senior leaders, or just older players for that matter, are going, and you're left with a great age range for a team that wants to compete, but maybe not a lot of players who have had long careers at the top of the game and can really help educate and bring up the younger players. So from a leadership standpoint, obviously he was a captain at Brentford. Is he the kind of captain who was just beloved by all his teammates? Was it a little more tougher love? You know, someone who's willing to demand more of his fellow professionals? What's his sort of leadership style, and do you think that will translate at Arsenal in terms of helping reinvigorate the leadership group that's being a bit decimated at the club this summer?
I think he isn't your traditional leader in a sense of you rarely see him kind of screaming at his teammates on the pitch. He doesn't really do that too much. I think he leads by example in that, whether that's a tackle, whether that's winning a header, whether that's playing a nice ball out through the lines. But he leads in a way that's not as what's the word? It's not as tangible as someone like a Declan Rice might be seen shouting at his teammates, for example.
Less demonstrable,
Exactly. So he doesn't typically lead in that way. But what I will say is that what he'll bring, and he's been on this journey with Brentford, right? Since we signed him in the Championship. He's fostered the careers of people like Ollie Watkins, Said Benrahma, who I know didn't work out at West Ham, but he's seen all of these players that go for these massive fees. And being around those kinds of players and nurturing them and making sure that they become the players that they're supposed to be. Bryan Mbeumo is another one who's gonna get that big money move to a different club. But I think he's just the best compliment I can pay him is that he makes everyone around him better, and it's a noticeable difference when he's not in the team. Everything just seems to tick a little bit more fluidly. Everything, tackles are won a bit more. We get more opportunities from set pieces when he's in the side. Those kind of little things that aren't necessarily associated with a traditional leader in that sense. He brings out a lot. It's difficult to kind of sum up his leadership style because I don't really think he has one. It's more what he does and the standards he holds himself to that reflects in other players.
No, I think that's great. Just that when that player is on the pitch, everyone knows their level has to stay high. They can't take a break. They can't rest on the pitch. I think that's great. I mean, then that leads to sort of my last question on this, and we can cover a few other topics, which is he'll be moving into a very different role, obviously, from captain and ever-present, at least when fit. I know you said his minutes have been managed a bit, to a role player. That role could be bigger than we anticipate. I mean, it may be the case that we want to give Zubimendi time to bed in and not have so much pressure, and that Norgaard might be the guy who starts the season at 6 for us. But I tend not to think so. And if you look at Jorginho, who's the player he's most directly replacing, right? Because Zubimendi's replacing Partey, Norgaard's replacing Jorginho, and Jorginho had 700 minutes last season. I anticipate his role being bigger than that, but there is a possibility that it might not be. Now, Mikael Arteta might be looking at this as a chance to say, you know what, we're expected to compete for everything, and everything includes competitions like the League Cup and the FA Cup, where using your first team players in those competitions can undermine your season with respect to the league and the Champions League. And suddenly if you have someone like Christian Norgaard starting in midfield in the League Cup, that's still a really high level of quality, a competitive team that you're putting out. But how do you think he will fare as a role player versus what he's done at Brentford? And do you think either performance-wise or just psychologically that he'll be able to adapt to that? Because there's some players, Aaron Ramsey was like this in our team once upon a time, Thomas Partey has certainly been like this, that they thrive when they have a consistent run. But when they've been out of the team and come back in, they don't come back right away at the same level. You mentioned his minutes are managed. So like when he has come back from an absence or come back from being rested, is he able to hit the level right away? Do you think he'll be able to thrive in a role player kind of role for us?
I think in terms of what I know about him and his personality, I wouldn't be surprised if, whilst he's pushing other players to be better as well, he'll be pushing himself to be better. I don't think he's going in to Arsenal. I think he'll know that he's going to, play that role a little bit, but I think he'll challenge himself to push for a place more consistently at least.
That's great.
In terms of coming in and hitting those levels again when he's been out or when he's not played for sustained football for a period of time, it doesn't take him long at all. That's what I mean. Like I mentioned about that bad game that he had towards the start of the season, we knew that the levels would be straight back up to where they were because he's not the kind of player to dwell on a mistake. He'll just continue to go again. And I think it's important that you mentioned that role that Zubimendi may or may not play this season. If Arteta wants to kind of ease him into Premier League football, whether he wants to throw him in from the start, having someone like Christian Norgaard to come in, make an impression as well, by the way. If he comes in and makes an impression, then he might, I'm not saying that he's going to oust, your marquee summer signing, but he's going to want to do that, which I think, if he comes in and he starts the season and it is a case of Zubimendi being eased into the starting 11, you'll see his quality. Fans will see his quality. Mikael Arteta will see his quality and maybe give him something to think about, or maybe just change his perception on him, because he'll see him as that kind of role player that you're saying. But I don't think, you can only know the player once you see him training day in, day out, the standards that he sets in training and how he performs in those big games. So far at Brentford, you know that he's a standard setter in training, and you know that he's a 7 out of 10 at least every week. So in terms of coming in and hitting the levels when he is needed to, he can do that. But I would back him, and I want him to be able to go in there and be like, I've beat at Brentford, but I've always thought my level could be higher. This is my opportunity to prove that it can be.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So now we're going to ask you to write some fan fiction here, right? Predict the future. Can you see a Christian Norgaard at 31 years old being good enough to force his way into a team as a regular starter that can win a Premier League or a Champions League? Or is that level maybe just too high for him? And again, not to say that he can't be an important part of a team that does that, but you said he's going to want to prove that he can win this, his place. And I think any great player should come in with that idea. But can you see him being a 30-game starter in the league or a regular starter in the Champions League for a team that goes on to win those trophies?
I think and it's a similar kind of question that I've been asked with Thomas Frank in will he be able to succeed and win trophies and do all these things?
Hopefully not.
And I think, the same kind of answer that I'll give is that if there's an indication to suggest that either of them can, you only need to look at Brentford's record since we've been in the Premier League. We've beaten every single team that we've played at least once. In the 22-23 season, I want to say, or 23-23 season, we had the best record against the top 6 in the league. Christian Norgaard was a massive part of that. So if you're taking that as a small sample size of the best teams in the world and the best teams in England, then they have proved on a consistent basis, at least in that season and throughout our time in the Premier League, that they can get results. They can beat those teams and they can compete at the highest level. If you're asking me whether he's a midfielder that's going to be able to win Premier Leagues and play 30 games and play in the Champions League, the honest answer is I don't know, because what you've got at Brentford is a manager who was overperforming with undervalued players. Christian Norgaard is one of those undervalued players. You take that relationship away, I'm not sure what Christian Norgaard is like not under Thomas Frank. And he got the best out of him and they got the best out of each other. They had a super close relationship when they were at Brentford. So it's difficult to know from the evidence we have, I would say that, and from the performances that I've seen him make against the better sides in the division, I would say that he can, but it is an unknown.
Oh, it's so interesting because when you put it like that, you put Brentford's record against the big clubs in the Premier League in context. Maybe it is the case that Mikael Arteta is really drawn to this player, not just for his quality and his leadership and his experience, but as a player who has proven that what he can do is play in teams that beat the best teams. Because, look, if there's something Arsenal have to get better at, it's not beating the best teams. It's beating the other teams. It's breaking down low blocks, and that's going to be decided by the attacking signings that we make this season, whether it's Sesko and Rodrigo or it's Eze or whatever it is. That's where that's going to be decided, right? Adding more firepower there. But it really is interesting to think about in Zubimendi and Norgaard, two players that I think can be in a team that competes with the best teams and can get a result against the best teams. And if he's been doing it at Brentford, which, I think from a talent standpoint, you'd have to say is a level below Arsenal, then it is perfectly reasonable to think that will translate to doing it at Arsenal, where he has players like Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard with him. In terms of the physical presence of a midfield too, if we want to put a midfield out there of Norgaard, Rice, and Marino or something, if there are games where you really want to boss somebody physically, against these teams that are going to try to be more technical, it's an interesting way to go. So it gives us a lot of options. It's really exciting to think about. I want to pivot just slightly quickly on to two other topics before we let you go. One is Thomas Frank. Obviously, I have to say a manager I have a lot of time for, a lot of respect for, really like the way he speaks about the game, really like his philosophy. I am finding it hard, although I'm sure I will find a way to pivot to loathing him with every fiber of my being. I think he is making a move to Spurs at the best possible time, by the way, because I think Ange Postecoglou is an absolute disgrace. And I think there isn't a world where he can't improve them. Now, to be fair, he's taking over a team that just won a European trophy, as much as it makes me sick to say it. But he's also taking over a team that lost 22 times in the Premier League, and I think with the scarecrow at manager, they won't do that again. So I think he has an opportunity to improve them. But do you think Thomas Frank is the kind of manager who can wipe the stink off of a club that has historically found a way to be the butt of the joke over and over and over again?
I think there's a lot of things contingent on the answer being yes. The first being that he has to be backed. And as we know, Daniel Levy isn't one to reach into his pocket too often.
No, he's got Matisse Tell. He'll be fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I think first and foremost, he has to be backed. I think Thomas Frank's spoken a lot about when you go into a new club, you need to be able to get the people in that you want and the people out that you want. There's also a question around the recruitment structures in place at Brentford compared to that of Tottenham. I think at Brentford, you're part of a well-oiled machine in the way that we recruit players through the director of football, through the technical director and through the owner, Matthew Benham. It's very data-led. Be interesting to see if Thomas Frank wants to kind of implement some of those things at Tottenham. I think that would be interesting. But the thing that he had at Brentford is that he'd always have the final say on players, and it's a bit more collaborative approach. Whereas at Tottenham, I don't know if that's going to happen. I know that he knows the sporting director, Johan Langer, but I'm not sure if it will be as collaborative and as kind of streamlined as it was at Brentford, because we're consistently finding these gems. And what Thomas Frank is good at is making players better. I think if you look at his record of doing that, he will make every player, well, he will make most players at Tottenham better, because if we're using the evidence from the past, you look at players like Ollie Watkins, Saïd Benrahma, Ivan Toney, Bryan Mbeumo, Christian Norgaard, Nathan Collins. I could go on and on and on and on with these players. There is no question for me that he'll improve their floor. It's just a case of whether he's going to have the players. He'll make them a better team. He'll make them harder to beat, especially in the games against you and the other members of the Big Six. He'll make them harder to beat. I think you've seen that in the games that you've played against us. It's never you never really roll us over, and we don't really tend to get rolled. We haven't tended to get rolled over too much in the Premier League since we've been in it. And you won't like this, I want him to do well, and I do, for a lot of reasons, I do think it's a good fit. They've got a young squad, they've got some brilliant attacking players, and Thomas Frank's track record of improving attacking players in particular is really good. He's got Brennan Johnson and Archie Gray there, two players that he heavily pursued when he was at Brentford. He's got a striker in Dominic Solanke that is very similar in ways to Ivan Toney and is very similar in ways to Ollie Watkins. Like, the midfielders are quite similar to Brentford's. The defenders are also quite... It kind of seems a really good fit for me, which is probably not what you want to hear. But at the end of the day, like you already said, it's Tottenham, so we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you even saw at the end of last season with Tottenham is when Ange was willing to sacrifice who we are, mate, and just defend even a little.
Yeah.
They went from being a car crash, clown car of a team to at least being functional, and that's how they won the Europa League, by the way, by playing some of the worst football you've ever seen in your life and nicking it. I think there's no world where they won't improve defensively under Frank. Just the organization will be better. The philosophy and the system will be better. I don't think he'll be back the way he needs to ever get. I mean, if you think about the golden era of Tottenham Hotspur, where they won, again, I want to emphasize this, nothing whatsoever, with Harry Kane and Son in his prime, they lucked into one of the best strikers in the history of Premier League football from their academy. They hit a home run with Youngmin Son, and the two of them together in their prime. I just don't think they get lucky enough to reproduce anything like that. And when you have that, that can take you to some dizzying heights, which by their standards they did. I think you can see the challenge for Frank already in the fact that I think he wants Mbeumo and he's not going to get him. Yeah, I think he wanted Damsgaard, Norgaard, pardon me, keep doing that, and he's not going to get him. And he's getting Matisse Tell, who's a work in progress. I mean, look, he'll be very familiar with getting players that are work in progress, that are young, that he has to develop, but that club needs an injection of ready-made 25, 26-year-old quality that can compete in the top third of the Premier League, and it has very, very little of it. Brennan Johnson had a good season, and I think he's a pretty good player, but I think he's a bit of a lightweight player. I think nothing really sums up Tottenham quite like Maddison, because he's a bit flimsy. He doesn't particularly stay fit. He can't play well in the big games. He gets bossed out of games. When it's all going his way and he can have some fun, there's quality in his boots, but he's not like a serious footballer, if you know what I mean. Like he's a fun guy who has some talent, but like I just feel like that's the kind of player that's going to drive Thomas Frank nuts. You know what I mean? And it's a squad full of players like that in my mind. So we'll see. Last thing here though. I keep mentioning him accidentally. This time I mean it. Mikael Damsgaard. Well, actually, two things. Sorry, I'll do this quickly. Bryan Mbeumo looks like he's going to go to Manchester United. Everybody at this point who listens to an Arsenal podcast will know he was one of the top XG overperformers in the league this season. So his goal tally, I'm not going to say inflated, but looks a bit of an outlier versus the chances he had. Is Bryan Mbeumo able to go into a dysfunctional Manchester United and be a piece of a puzzle to restoring them to some degree of glory, or is that asking too much?
I don't get the United transfer at all. I would have preferred him to go to Spurs, to be honest. Just for his career, I think the system that Amorim plays, I don't think he's a 10. I don't want him to play wing back. I've seen so many Man United fans saying he's played as a 10 at Brentford or he's played as a wing back for. It's like no, he's not. He's a right winger who likes to start high and wide, but can also maybe do a shift as a 9 or playing off a big man like he did with Ivan Toney. He's not a 10. I don't get. He needs space to run into. He needs to be able to attack his fullback, and he needs to be able to cut in from the left hand side of the pitch and score a lot of goals. And I don't like the Man United signing. I don't get it. I just think it's a weird one for me. I would have much preferred him to go to a club that plays his system. And maybe he was a Man United fan when he was a kid, and I understand that they've still got a bit of pull. A bit of pull. I say that
they have money. That's always going to give you some pull.
I know they've got money, and they've managed to sign Mateus Cunha. It looks like they're going to have Mbeumo wrapped up in the next few days. But I would have gone somewhere where the path to a trophy or the path to regular Champions League football is a lot clearer. And I don't think it is that clear at Man United, especially from the season that Amorim had, or the half a season that Amorim had, and everything that's going on with that football club over the last kind of 4 or 5 years. It just seems like something you'd like to avoid, but it's Manchester United, so
Yeah, I mean, if Amorim's going to play like 3-4-2-1 or whatever you want, 3-4-1-2, whatever it is, that front three is going to be some combination of Mbeumo, Cunha, and Gyökeres or something like that,
or whoever
it is. And I don't know which of those roles suits Mbeumo. I guess you could say if it's a 1-2 that he's a support striker in that system, and maybe that is a good fit for him. But in terms of the elite talent, would you say, forgetting system and forgetting the manager and the club he's gone to, is he a Champions League talent? Is he a player who in the right place could be at the very, very top of the game from a talent standpoint?
I think he's a player that he needs a system that allows him to have options so that he's not kind of the main man in the Brentford team. He wasn't. We kind of shared that responsibility this season was shared amongst the front four in Mikael, Damsgaard, Kevin Schade, Johan Wissa. Him on his own, and we've spoken about it on our pod quite a lot. When he's at his best, unplayable. It's just a case of when he's at his best, doesn't tend to come in the biggest of games, and it doesn't tend to come too often. And I feel like we've voiced our concerns a little bit over. That's where the pressure comes in, because when you have a bad game for Brentford, not many people are going to get on your back, because you know that you might have a good game in 5 games time and you've scored 20 goals for us, and you know we're still at the end of the day one of the smallest clubs in the Premier League with one of the smallest budgets. You go to somewhere like Manchester United and you drop a stinker, people are going to start to get on your back. And we notice, and we've noticed with Bryan Mbeumo throughout his time at Brentford, he hits those levels, and when he does, you think, wow, this guy, Champions League level player. And he has gotten a lot better. His decision making has improved. A lot of facets to his game have improved since he's been at Brentford. But he does need to nail that consistency. And I guess that is like the hardest part of being, or the biggest part of being an elite level footballer, is being an 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10 each week, being the best player on the pitch 5 times out of 10. And at the moment, he hasn't shown that. He's shown that he could. With the right coaching, I think if he could have stayed at Brentford with Thomas Frank for another few years, he might have hit those levels. But yeah, at Manchester United, I'm not so keen on that.
I would have liked him actually as a option off the right when Saka doesn't play, or even as an emergency 9 for us. But again, I don't think Bryan Mbeumo wants to go to a club where he's just a rotational option. I think he is better than that. Man. Yeah. And look, Manchester United have invested a lot of money, or look like they're about to invest a lot of money in the two of the biggest XG overperformers in the league last season, in Cunha and Mbeumo. Like that could blow up in their face. All right, this is the last thing I promise. Just quickly, Mikael Damsgaard's getting a lot of praise from a lot of people around the league, who watch Premier League football. I think he's a really lovely player going right into the meat of his prime now. Do you want to just quickly explain how good Damsgaard is? What the ceiling on his talent is, and why he's getting so much love from players that have from people that have watched Brentford a lot the last couple of seasons.
I think the thing to say with Mikael Damsgaard is what makes it so much better is his story, his kind of redemption arc, because we signed him in 2022 after he had like a really good Euros campaign, scored a fantastic goal for Denmark against England in the semi-final, and then his kind of first 2 seasons at Brentford were completely marred by injury. He would come on, look really good, have a couple of games, and then just get injured again. And that cycle just kept on repeating itself. But towards the back end of the season before last, he came in for the last 10 games and he was amazing. And we were all thinking maybe this is going to be his year. And it really was. Like, he was just the playmaking ability. He got 10 assists this season, which is his best return in a Brentford shirt. I think only 3 other players in the Prem got more than him. But it's not just his assists. His 1v1 ability, his work off the ball, his chance creation, the way that he glides around the pitch, because he's not the biggest. He's built like a 12-year-old, but for some reason he manages to he can get away from some of the biggest and most imposing central midfielders in the league. There was a goal that we scored against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup where he like nutmegs Joe Linton, or he nutmegs Guimaraes, gets away from Tonali, and then just plays this beautiful through ball towards Bryan Mbeumo. He's like, we've just signed him down to a long-term deal. He wasn't as good in the second half of the season as he was in the first, but in the first half of the season, wow, like I've never seen a player explode into a starting 11 the way that he did last season, because he was best player on the pitch. It literally, in most games that we played, even if we'd lost, I could imagine the players in the opposition dressing room going, who the hell is this guy? Because he was just dancing around players at will. So yeah, I'm hoping that he can hit the levels that he hit at the first half of last season throughout the rest of next year. But yeah, in terms of his ceiling, we've only seen one amazing season from him. He just needs to carry on building, and I'm glad that we've tied him down to a long-term contract. So if anyone wants to poach him, or if he wants to leave this transfer window too, it will cost a lot of money.
Yeah, I think there's a point at which Brentford's going to say this shop is closed.
Yeah,
yeah, because at some point, you're looking at trying to stay in the Premier League. If you lose enough talent, well, at least you'll be good at set pieces this season. So you've got that. Mike, look, I really appreciate it. I know we went longer than we expected. It's a fantastic chat. It gives me a lot to think about, and hopefully the people listening a lot to think about, because I find myself more excited about Norgaard than I was, and I was pretty excited about the signing, but now I'm really curious to watch him come and fight for his place and see where his game can take him at Arsenal. It'll be very, very interesting to watch. So please check out Mike's podcast, the Ealing Road Podcast, and then Mike in 5, is that right?
Mike
On
Live in
YouTube?
5.
What was it?
Mike Live in 5 on
Mike
TikTok
Live
and
in
YouTube.
5, sorry, on TikTok and YouTube. Mike, after we sign, I don't know, Wissa and Damsgaard or whoever it is, we can have you back on, or maybe we'll just exchange pod appearances around one of our games with each other. But thanks so much for coming on.
Nice one, Elliot. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's going to do it for this show. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed having Mike on, and I thought he gave us some great information about Christian Norgaard. That's super exciting. So I think it could be a busy week, which means we'll have an absolute ton to share with you this week. We're going to have a big history pod over on Patreon, transfer dailies. Friday Night Clive will be out on Friday. And then, as news breaks, we may have other things for you. We'll have main pod on Thursday. A lot to cover. We'll get to scouting videos probably next week. I'm traveling this week, so it's a little hard to do scouting videos while I'm on the road, but we will still have all the usual content for you. So hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks so much for being here. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10 transfer window now.